Okay, our very last question is quite interesting, and it's a little bit different in the fact it's about money and relationships and managing semi-separate finances. So Amy sent this via email, and it was a big question, so I'm going to take a few key parts from it. But essentially, Amy has been getting serious about her finances during the last couple of years during COVID. And she's starting a little bit later on in her journey, and she's listened to the podcast, done some of the courses, so she's ready to go. She wants to really create. Yeah, go Amy.
She's done the course. Go Amy.
Create some long-term goals. But her husband has zero interest in talking about any long-term financial goals, long-term investing, anything like that, and is really focused on just day-to-day cash flow. There was a bit of background about his father being a successful stockbroker in the 80s and then losing everything in the crash. So there's a bit of history here. So there's some reasons why he might not want to talk about it. But Amy really wants to start building wealth slowly, and she really wants to start now because she's heard us talk again and again about just getting started early and having time on your side. So they've got some savings, no assets, no major debt. And really, she just wants to get started, but he's not really on board. So she's wondering what's the best way to approach it.
It's actually a tremendous question because
it is huge.
Yeah, it touches on so many different aspects. Obviously, the big one is psychology. It's obviously, and not just in this situation, it's actually in everyone's situation. And I guess the personal lived experience with the trauma of investing, as Amy points out, is real.
Yeah.
You see your parents, and your father in this case, invest so much and probably be very confident in that field as a profession, and then everything just turns to crap and you lose everything. That's a big thing. So we've obviously got to talk about the psychology and the value systems. How does he treat money? Does he just get super anxiety about any conversation? Unfortunately, it's hard, but maybe the key there is to abdicate his responsibility. So what I mean by that is maybe it's okay for one person in the couple to take the reins and be like, this is what we're going to do. What do you think of this? I'm happy to do it for us. I do see that quite a bit with some couples where one person might be stronger in one area than the other person. So savings and investing, there might be two different skills, or they might be both in one person altogether. I would say there is probably the number one trick around this is maybe to try and motivate him in a different way. So, Barefoot has the date nights, of course. That's a really easy icebreaker. Like, you kind of take him to the pub and then all of a sudden spring finances on him. You might be inclined to try and find something that he's interested in. So rather than talking about investing in shares, because that's what his dad knows is scary, maybe you can say to him, well, what about a property? What about a home for our family? Let's talk about investing in that. And if that's not really appealing, maybe you can talk about, well, hey, why don't we turn it into a game? Why don't here's $500 for you, here's $500 for me. Let's start with that and see what we do. Or there's the Raise app. Just break it in slowly. Maybe trying to make a deal with him in some way. I go, you go type thing. He could get something in return. And you could say, well, if you listen to one episode of Kate and Owen's podcast and pick one that is a little bit, acknowledges the risks of investing and all that sort of stuff. So he feels like he's also validated with his fears. But then we also talk about long-term principles. Maybe you can do that. Maybe you can say, you do this, I do that. And a quid pro quo. The other thing, obviously family dynamics are really important too. So understanding his goals for your family and trying to maybe sit around the table and say, hey, I just want to teach them good money values.
I was even going to say, just trying to work out what kind of cash balance would make both of you feel comfortable, because we say like that basic emergency fund of 3 to 6 month expenses. But if you add in costs of kids, if you add in someone who's really anxious about investing to begin with, it might just might just need to throw out the numbers of what makes sense to keep in a cash balance and actually just find something that works for you. So if that might be 20 or 30,000, don't worry about what that could mean if you had invested that money, but work out what that means to actually help your family start investing. Because I have spoken to a lot of people, and that to get started, they need a much bigger cash balance to make them feel comfortable, or to make their partner feel comfortable, because they just like seeing that money in the bank. I know a lot of people who just like to see they've got that safety net in the bank. And for some couples, it might be a lot bigger than others.
Yeah. The psychology of money is very powerful. You might find that it takes a year to get him across the line because you might be starting with, hey, let's build up this cash balance. Just having the conversation about, okay, where do we put the cash? Is it in a savings account with Macquarie? Is it ING? Is it up bank? Let's talk about it. And you might just have to win one thing at a time. Rather than trying to scale Everest, it might be one thing at a time. That I would say is just try to find what motivates him. If he's anything like me, he'll probably be super stubborn. I know a lot of men are like this. We're always super stubborn. We've got the answers. Don't worry about me, love. I've got this. When we don't got this. So those types of people can be pretty hard to break down. It can be pretty challenging. So maybe you can talk to friends about it. Maybe you can talk to family about it, and see what they think. See if they can help this person get motivated. I know, like, some of my friends don't want to talk about finance as much as I'm, like, hey guys, what about these investments? They're not going to talk about it. So I know what it's like. But also at the end of the day, I think the question here, Amy, is you may also have to pull yourself together for the kids, and you maybe have to pull the finances together. So that may mean starting to even dollar cost average a little bit more money into super. It may mean starting with a micro investing app, starting to invest small amounts that way, and occasionally saying, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see that? Just doing it, just getting shit done really is what it might take. And that's okay. You don't have to let it come between you. I know plenty of couples where one person does take ownership of it. And that's okay too. And then you can work on him on the side.
Yeah. And I think if there's maybe one day you'll come across a particular video or a TED talk that explains it in a really good way that you think will interest him, and even just sending that across. I mean, I'm always the person that sends little videos to friends and family in the hope that maybe one day they'll watch one and want to talk about it. But I don't send it with any strings attached, and I kind of just let it sit there and maybe spark a conversation when they're ready. So I think just as long as he knows you're there and you can talk about it when the time's right, and maybe you just have to get started and start taking action, and then slowly bring each other on board over time.
What does Scott say in the Barefoot Investors? Ladies have more tools at their disposal than they realize when it comes to motivating men with money. It's like the date nights work, right? So, it's...
well, if you haven't read The Barefoot Investor, I'm sure Scott Pape has some good tips on having a money date night for you. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And these are just little things, right? These are not necessarily they're not motivated by money in the first instance. They're motivated by other things. So find out what else he's motivated by. If you get him to sit down and read, you say, hey, you got to read this book. He's going to be like, well, maybe not. But if it's something that's interesting, like you might watch a movie on money, you might just try and build intrigue in some other way that he's not necessarily aware of straight away. So, there's the Theranos series. There is the Big Short. There's a bunch of fun shows that talk about money in new and exciting ways. Maybe don't play into the Wolf of Wall Street with him, because it sounds like
I'm not sure the Big Short's the right one to watch in this situation.
Yeah, but my point is just just have the conversation, because a lot of people just don't have the conversation. We know Natasha Eichmann from Tash Invest always talks about this. She always talks about how money is not spoken about, and therefore that's the real problem. So the more speaking about it you can do, the better. But Amy, you're definitely not alone. Like, if anyone is in the Facebook group is in a similar situation, everyone is similar in this regard, but also different. And so the strategies that people have will be varied, but we would love to know more about what you've done to motivate your partner. We've all experienced this. I've experienced this, not necessarily in my relationship, but with friends and family. I see this all the time. It's the hardest part. So tell us, what have you done? How have you overcome that? Give us some strategies. Maybe we can save the favorite finance movies for another podcast, Kate.
There's a lot of new ones recently, so I think we'll have plenty of material to add. Scams, financial scams are the flavor of the year.
Don't show him them either. Do not show him them either.
Yes.
Let's just focus on the good stuff. Like give him like a Warren Buffett documentary or a Jack Bogle documentary.
The positive aspects of money where it has really changed someone's life or helped them reach financial goals that they never thought possible before. I think the more and more we speak about it and hear about people that have turn their financial life around, I think those stories are really empowering to help other people get started. And I think that's why we liked sharing some of those listener stories last year, and hopefully we'll be sharing some more this year, just because you can see what money can do for you and you can see the positive impacts. Sure, there have been some really horrible negative impacts, but there can be some amazing stories coming out of it. So focus on those and maybe just have exposure to those different sort of sources.